All right. See if this is working. Check my mic. Mic check 1 2 1 2. If anyone can hear me in the chat, just push one. All right. Thank you all for the confirmation and the wait. I put myself on mute, so that's why you didn't hear me. But welcome back to the Black Brain Trust. This is episode 313, 313. Pan African Talk. Please hit the like button as you come in, share the video if possible, and hit that notification bell so you get all the updates from the Black Brain Trust, including those posted on the community tab on a weekly basis. There's also a docket and description beneath the video for you to follow along with. And if you want to get on the panel tonight, there's a link in the chat. You just click on that in the waiting room, raise your hand so that you get acknowledged so that we can bring you onto the panel. You're not just waiting in the waiting room. All right, with that being said, I'm not going to waste any more time. I'm just going to get started. I'm just going to get right into it. All right, the first item on the docket is from Forbes.com. Africa doesn't need more development aid, it needs more capitalism. In 1990, the UN made a commitment to reduce global poverty by 50% within 25 years. That this ambitious goal has been achieved is largely due to China's success. Within the same period, the percentage of the population living below the poverty line increased from 56.8% to 42.7% across the continent of Africa. However, with 20% of Africans living under the specter of starvation, a higher percentage than anywhere else in the world, there is still a long way to go. And the situation has not improved in recent years. In fact, it has deteriorated, especially in Africa. The State of Food Security and Nutrition in the World report for 2019 was jointly published by the several UN organizations and confirms a rise in world hunger for the third year in a row. It is now estimated that there are 821 million chronically undernourished people in the world. In the period up to 2015, this number had been in decline. It has now climbed back to the levels last seen in 2011. Compared to 2017, the proportion of malnourished people, 20%, has increased in almost all the regions of Africa. The worst hit regions are East Africa, where almost 31% of the population suffer from malnutrition, and Central Africa, where the figure is 26.5%. As soon as the above figures were published, demands for increased development aid for Africa followed reflexively. Development aid has a nice moral ring to it, and in some people's view, it constitutes a kind of quasi-religious atonement for the sins of colonialism and the exploitation of the third world by capitalist countries. But does it really achieve what its proponents hope it will? In 2002, the then Senegalese president, Abdoulaye Wade, said, "I've never seen a country develop itself through aid or credit. Countries that have developed in Europe, America, Japan, Asian countries like Taiwan, Korea, Singapore, have all believed in free markets. There is no mystery there. Africa took the wrong road after independence. In Asia, the fight against poverty and hunger has been so effective because so many Asian countries have implemented capitalist reforms. In China alone, thanks to the partial introduction of private property rights and free market economics, the proportion of people living in extreme poverty has fallen 88% from 88% in 1981 to below 1% today. Asian countries have received much less development aid than African countries. Zambia-born Dambisi Moyo, who studied at Harvard and earned a PhD from Oxford, identifies Western development aid as one of the reasons for the failure to rid Africa of poverty. In the past 50 years, over $1 trillion in development-related aid has been transferred from rich countries to Africa. Moyo points out in her book dead aid, but has more than $1 trillion in development assistance over the last several decades made African people better off? No. In fact, across the globe, the recipients of this aid are worse off, much worse off. Aid has helped make the poor poorer and growth slower. The notion that aid can alleviate systemic poverty and has done so is a myth. Millions in Africa are poorer today because of aid. Misery and poverty have not ended but have increased. Aid has been and continues to be an unmitigated political, economic, and humanitarian disaster for most parts of the developing world. To be clear, Moyo's criticism is not directed against ad hoc famine and disaster relief, but against long-term financial transfers aimed at boosting economic development. These these funds have frequently ended up in the hands of corrupt despots rather than those of the poor. William Easterly, professor of economics and studies at New York University, also believes that foreign aid is largely pointless and frequently counterproductive. But there is still hope for Africa. The rise of broadband and mobile technologies has led to a loosening of state control across many industries allowed entrepreneurs to thrive independent of government support and political connections. Many of this newly emerged class of self-confident young Africans have studied overseas, typically in Europe or the United States, but increasingly in China and India as well. Many of them work for international corporations before they return to their native countries. Unnoticed by the wealthy global North, Africa is seeing the emergence of a class of entrepreneurs who are driving and shaping the economic upswing across the continent. Africa offers plenty of economic opportunities. However, some of the predictions of a massive boom across the continent currently uh, bandied about by pundits are based on models that fall short of realistic appreciation of the facts on the ground. Attempting to replicate Asian success stories in Africa without taking the differences between the two continents into consideration would be too simplistic. But Africa could definitely learn one thing from Asia. Hunger and poverty are not fought through development aid, but through entrepreneurship and capitalism. Even U2's lead singer, Bono, who formerly organized massive festivals to raise aid for Africa and for so long espoused anti-capitalist rhetoric and a seemingly unshakable belief in foreign aid as a solution to hunger and poverty in Africa, has changed his tune under the weight of evidence to the contrary. Aid is just a stopgap, he confessed in 2013 during a speech at Georgetown University. Commerce and entrepreneurial capitalism take more people out of poverty than aid. We need Africa to become an economic powerhouse. So I think this is interesting because when you compare foreign aid to um, the, to what happens in America with ADOS. In America, they give out welfare. That would be considered aid, and the welfare and the subsidies from the government have not actually lifted Black people out of poverty. In fact, it creates a recidivism of poverty and reciprocal rates of poverty for generation to generation. The grandmother, the daughter, and then the granddaughter or the grandchild, for that matter, end up in reciprocal rates of poverty. And that's the way the United States government operates domestically, and the foreign aid that goes into Africa does the exact same thing. It has the same exact effect. So the article is pretty spot on. And I think we've talked about startups, Black people investing into more startups. But when we bring these sort of points up, there's so much pushback against this that it makes you wonder if people are conditioned, at least Black people in America are conditioned to only see government subsidies as the only way to maintain, a Black environment. Because when you start talking about entrepreneurship, startups, and tech sector development and investments in the fourth industrialized emerging economies, suddenly people don't want to have that conversation anymore. Hey, what's going on, DE Raptor? What's going on, Nicole?
Pretty good. How you doing, Mike?
Good,
Mr.
brother.
Hey,
Nicole,
what's
how you
what's
doing,
going
brother?
on? What's going on, DE? What's going on? What's going
Pretty
on?
good.
Anything you want to add to what you heard so far?
No, I think it's right on the money. I mean, we've been seeing aid. A lot of times, the aid that has come into Africa over the years has been designed to keep the nation, excuse me, to keep the continent down, or to keep many nations that were getting aid on the continent down. Aid to do this, aid to do that, aid to build this, aid to build that, and then they found out, that a lot of this aid that they were getting was really setting them back financially as well. And then it would open up for those nations, if you will, that was supposedly giving them aid to come in and to take over some of those lands and so forth, based on the fact that some of this aid and stuff like that were tied to loans and all this kind of stuff that just wasn't going to work for them, and then put them behind the 8 ball. So we were seeing that's been a strategy for quite a while. That's not all the aid across the board, but that certainly has been a part of it. Certainly when we start talking about the IMF and World Bank and others, we kind of know how that game is played. So the name of the game is absolutely to develop, just like we're seeing in Ghana and Uganda and some of these other countries, Nigeria and so forth, that are starting to build somewhat of a slowly. It's not happening overnight, but slowly starting to build a manufacturing base. That's where we start to look at the BRICS nations. Certainly, that are the BRICS nations that besides Brazil and Russia, but we start looking at South Africa and so forth. I mean, we're looking at countries that are developing and have a very fast developing middle class as well, through a manufacturing development base. That's where you kind of have to go, and aid is not gonna pull you out or raise you up. And we've known this for a while. This quite frankly is not anything new, but it's good to hear that somebody's actually out here speaking on this and then blasting it outright, because this has been known for a while. But certainly development, business, manufacturing, so forth. This is what's going to bring a lot of these people out of poverty, creating jobs. Developing your society is a great way to lift yourself out of poverty.
DE?
Well, for me, I look at two nations that when he started talking about aid, and this one that Live Aid Bono, one of the biggest criminals who ever come to Africa. I mean, if people knew what he did in the name of providing aid to Africans, they would have prosecuted him. But anyway, look at England and France. Supposedly, they give aid to their I don't know, former colonies in Africa. But if they give that's for just numbers. If they give 50 million in aid to Africa and take out 500 billion, what is the aid that they're giving? They're not giving any aid. That payment was to all the leaders of Africa, all the countries in Africa that they set up the leaders and paid them off to steal all the resources of Africa. That wasn't aid to the people. That was aid to the leaders. They deposited the money in Switzerland and London and in the case, let's take for instance Nigeria. I've seen videos of Nigerian leaders' children who are feeding their puppies from gold plates at parties in London. And Nigeria is sinking. These petrol companies are are letting the wells run oil all over the land to destroy the land. So this aid that he's talking about is that was set up to destroy Africa. That wasn't really aid to help Africa. It wasn't never intended to. And he should start when he start listing the things that were wrong with Africa. One of the things he should have listed is that the banks
Mm-hmm.
in Europe and America made made off like I mean Bank of Scotland. But there was one video I saw about this one little town in Switzerland
Mm-hmm.
that they own some of the resources in Africa. And when they start telling people, hey, the places that where you own this your factory that made all of the people in this town millionaires. When they say, why don't you chop back on your profits so you can help some of the people in the state where you're, they say no, we are not going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's only now that you see China came into Africa and changed the dynamic, that you see people like this come out talking about how capitalism can develop Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And it is capitalism, but it's not the kind of capitalism that they've been practicing in Africa all these years.
Well, the capitalism they were practicing in Africa, or Western capitalism, was really more of a I wouldn't so much call it capitalism. I would call it, a certain level. That was a certain level of economic warfare against the country, against many countries that were there in Africa. So you have to look at Africa as, all these different countries as a continent. They hit it hard, but many of these different countries that they hit in
Exactly.
Africa
Yep.
were slated, man, to be kept from development. So, like I said, the World Bank and all them. When you talk about the Royal Bank of Scotland and all the people that we call the World Bank, is a conglomeration of supposedly these banks, primarily American banks. Primarily, that's what they are, primarily American banks. But that's what we're basically talking about as far as what really set the planet up to fail or not to succeed. And yes, the absolute advent of China and Russia, investing and coming in, it's definitely changed the dynamics immensely. Definitely changed the dynamics, and I think we're starting to see there's going to be some big changes, and America, we unfortunately took a very bad policy there over many years. We took some, our policies there on the continent were bad ones, and these are going to be that's going to be rectified. That's going to be turned around. It would be very smart for us African Americans here and ADOS people here to start not only with our development game here, but really start to make connections there as well to develop in business. That would be a very smart thing for us to do. Some of us already moving towards that. But that's something I think we should consistently talk about and consistently push here on this channel.
Yeah.
So my brother Lowcast, I respectfully disagree with you on partially.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Yeah.
China has to. You can't give away your money. But whereas the European has been destroying the land and taking out the resources and putting nothing back, the Chinese came in. Yes, they're taking the resources, but they are building the infrastructure. It's slow. It's coming slow, but you got to see the Chinese as being pragmatic, and they can't deal with just Africa. They have to deal with the whole world because they are a country that deals in commerce. And
Yeah.
commerce,
Good points.
in commerce, you have to trade with everybody. You know,
they're moving differently. They're moving differently than the rapacious Americans. They're moving differently. So I understand what Locast is trying to say. Saying the Chinese,
yeah,
so
yeah,
some
I
of them are
understand what he's
racist,
trying to say, but you know, to some
and they have their
degree,
issues. That's true, but
yeah.
but they are moving differently. They have to.
I
But
want to
yeah,
get I want to get Super Triz in here before we move on to the next article.
I think they've pretty much between D Raptor and the Gone. Shout out to both of them. I think they pretty much hit the nail right on the head. I think you know, the imagery that is portrayed to the general populace in America is one that has its origins in posturing. So it's under the guise of providing this great service to an impoverished population, but in actuality, it was just perpetuating, as you said, some of the conditions that that have existed for many decades. Because that money, the monies that were going as aids, were directly going into the hands of dictators and despots, and also like even when it wasn't, even when there were actual resources, like never mind just cash money. There's been many instances of actual, like say for instance, food and provisions that were confiscated by the individuals that control those areas, and then resold, sometimes sold to the people that they were intended to be given to for free.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the reason why aid doesn't work, and part of the reason, another.
Yeah, I think Super Triz is having issues. Super Triz hits on a very good point that some of the redistribution in food being sold. We saw the same thing in Haiti when a lot of aid was sent to Haiti through the Red Cross. That stuff was siphoned out by the Clinton Foundation, and the Haitians got nothing out of it. And to this very day, the houses that were supposed to be built were never built, and the aid that was supposed to go to the Haitians never got there, and thus the Haitians ended up in more cyclical rates of poverty, much like you see in the Black community in America, where the money that should actually go to the assistance that should actually go to Black people in these predominantly Black neighborhoods are actually being spent on playgrounds. Playgrounds costing 11, 15, $20 million for a playground that people don't even play in the lack of maintenance on it actually makes it unusable, because the very water fountains that should be putting out clean water are actually filled with piss and water not actually being pumped out of it. So you see a lot of what Super Triz is saying, as well as the despots, in local government here, not just in Africa and the Caribbean, but actually here too. All right, let me get to this next article.
Hey, Mike. I just want to say this very quickly. You need to highlight that as far as how what's going over there in the continent, as you see, that's going on right in our community as well. And the rapacious nature of how this is going, where these projects are coming in, spending $11 and $12 million on a park. A lot of that money is siphoned off and paid off to the politicians and so forth to say, well, these projects are going, look what's happening here. It's another freaking pork barrel money grab once again with public dollars, and folks just are not seeing what's going on, and what's been going on in the continent, how that game is played. It's almost like a business model to how they run the same thing here. Great example, keep bringing that kind of stuff up, because we need to continue to highlight that kind of thing. So a lot of people who want to say that they're ADOS and everything else like we are, let's look at what's going on in our own communities as well and see just how the same game is being played. And I don't see anybody really calling a lot of that out. That's got to be called out consistently. That's got to be looked at and called out consistently. And we're not doing that as much.
Poverty is a major business. Despite the fact that people are poor, there is a business model for capitalism. So I want to get to this next article. This one is from DisruptAfrica.com. Top 20 announced for this year's Amnesia Prize. The top 20 young entrepreneurs have been selected for this year's edition of the Anisha Prize, the winner of which will take home a cash prize of $25,000. I'm not going to read this whole thing. The Anisha Prize in African Leadership Academy and MasterCard Foundation partnership is dedicated to identifying, supporting, and celebrating African entrepreneurs between the ages of 15 and to 22 whose businesses redefine and reimagine Africa's growth trajectory. Over 500 applicants were received for this prize this year, with the 20 finalists chosen from across various sectors. The top 20 will gather in Johannesburg for a 12-day accelerator boot camp before pitching in front of an independent judging panel, which will decide the winner of the $25,000 grand prize. This year, please mute yourself if you're not going to be speaking. This year, we are particularly excited about the new format. We've created a tailored experience that will allow people to explore the Anisha movement in all its entirety, said Melissa Mbazo. Anisha program manager, from start to finish, the day will look at shaping the future of entrepreneurship on the continent, and young entrepreneurs will be at the helm steering the conversations. The 2019 finalists for the Anisha Prize are listed below. Asia Saeed, 20, Somalia, founder of Tudun, a social enterprise established to reduce unemployment for the Somalian youth. Goddess Grease Farid, 21, of South Africa, founder of Goody Tutors, a tutor agency which provides extra tutorial classes by offering one-on-one tutoring, university pre-exam workshops, and exam-focused math workshops for high school students. Marvelous Yongoro, 22, of Zimbabwe, founder of the Housing Hub, a service provision platform founded by Marvelous that uses smart business and distribution company with 2 branches that grow various produce, watermelon, okra, cassava, etc. Emmanuel Owusu, 22, of Ghana, founder of Campus Trends Ghana, a marketing firm providing advice, qualitative, and communication services to bridge the gap between the firm and the student market. Jarato Jala, or Jarato Jalo, 21, of Gambia, founder of Yamina Errands Runner, an enterprise founded by Jarato, which provides business errands such as business registration, bank account openings, administrative, etc. Caleb Anaboli, or Anabil, of Ghana, founder of High School Water Product, an enterprise which customizes sachet water to sell students at an affordable price, at affordable prices. I think this is a lot of this has been translated. Christian Kashan, 21, Ethiopia, co-founder of JabiaNet, an agricultural e-commerce platform that connects smallholder farmers with the market and also facilitates logistics and payment systems for them. Mamadang Jalal, 20, of Gambia, founder of Jalal Trading, a small-scale horticultural vegetables which he sells to vendors and households around the region. I'm not going to read this whole thing, but there's a lot of interesting little things that they've developed, interesting little platforms they've developed. A lot of it is Local 22. They are very hungry. Kudos to them, man, for taking away those cash prizes, man. That's the sort of entrepreneurship that is needed.
This, you know what this shows me is that even everybody's getting involved in this thing.
Hmm.
Everybody is getting involved in doing something, no matter how we might look at it from outside. I might look at it, unless you know Africa, you look at it and say, well, wow, this is only a small business. But that small business, take for instance, Sears and Roebuck, started on the street with a push cart,
Hmm.
five and dime stuff,
Hmm.
turned into a huge corporation.
Hmm.
The same thing is happening in Africa now. What happened in America before America became the great USA? All the little people who joined in creating whatever they could to support themselves or their family, that later on became huge businesses. The same thing is happening in Africa. That's the kind of attitude that you need. Well, we need it here really bad. You know what I'm saying? We need it here really bad because we have more. We have a greater variety of technology, education, and all of that here, and they are doing it against all the obstacles. We have fewer obstacles. Yes, we have some big ones. You know, the government is one of them, but we have the ability to do it and not doing
Hmm. All right, let me get to this next article real quick from the Washington Post. The Amazon of Africa's the Amazon of Africa faces a big challenge: no addresses. She had 8 hours, 32 packages to deliver, and no addresses. So the woman on the front lines of Africa's growing e-commerce industry stayed on the phone, listening to directions, look for the ice cream cart. Vivian Lakpa's job was to find the customers, even if they were nowhere near the ice cream cart, and stay polite, even when demanded to open an order before handing her money. So this is behind a paywall, but this brings up a very interesting point that most of the continent hasn't been developed with a postal system. Everything is by word of mouth and basically village for that matter. How I would address a situation like this from a technological standpoint, geospatial location. So basically leveraging satellite communications uh, with global positioning systems on the ground so that you can get an accurate point of where each house is and where it's coming from based on the smartphone's ability to map it out. So now you can kind of get a top-down view, map out the area, use a QR code, and authenticate that house for where it is, and then your mapping system on your phone or your tablet would actually take you to that person's house, or a drone would actually drop down where it needs to go based on the GPS location. You wouldn't need an actual mail directory or anything like that. At least for the time being, you would traverse a lot of these things because there are no streets like that. Right, the streets have not been named anything like that. It's mostly village for village, or you would actually have something similar to Amazon lockers where people go pick up their packages from. So there's a lot of opportunity that comes out of this.
Also, yeah, the Amazon locker model, I think that would be excellent for areas that consistently receive commerce. For those that are more sporadic, I think that perhaps a cross-referencing mechanism, such as like having a virtual ID, basically as part of the registration process, they like have a photograph, maybe even a series of photographs, and maybe authorized recipients of the packages have photographs as well. That will probably be updated, on a probably biannual basis. And that way the person delivering the package has an actual photograph to reference and say, okay, I'm at the right location. I'm verifying the location. Also, I have a verification of identity with the photograph that I'm looking at, and I know that this is the person.
It could be also biometric as well, because most of your phones do have biometric sensors on it for fingerprint reading or readability, right?
I agree with both of you guys, but there's a most phones in Africa are not smartphones, at least, especially outside of the city. Smartphones tend to be pretty expensive. The prices are coming down now, yeah, but most of them are not smartphones. The problem is that everybody has, well, not the problem, but everybody has a government issued ID, except you were born in the bush and never came out. And you can find that also. One of the problems I had when in 2012, 15, so 12, I was starting a business in Gambia. And my bank refused to send the money because I didn't have a numbered street address. I spent 2 days, more than 2 days sending them all kinds of information to get them to send me the money, and I send the money not to me directly, but to the bank account. The bank existed. They knew the bank existed. They knew I am the one sending the money. They spoke to me on the phone, but still, how can you not have an address? How can you not have a number? And even in the big cities, you have no names, streets with no name, because people normally, if I send a package to Africa, there's the city where it's going to and a telephone number. When the package arrives in that city, they call the person and say, "Hey, where in the city are you?" And they'll say, "Well, meet me at such and such a location." And both of them know the location, and that's where you deliver the package. You show up with your ID, with your government issued ID, and you receive the package. I don't know how this corporation is doing it, but that's probably the most difficult way you can do it. The best way is just call a person on the cell phone. When they show up to your location, they show you ID and hand over the package. That's it.
Yeah. Not everybody in Africa has an ID, which is a part of the major issue. All right, let me get to this next article. This one is from the World Economic Forum. These 5 startups are shaping the future of Africa's cities. By the end of the century, it is estimated that 13 of the world's 20 largest cities will be in Africa, and none of them will be in the Americas, China, or Europe. More than half of the world's population lives in cities, and sub-Saharan Africa is urbanizing faster than anywhere else on the planet. Sub-Saharan Africa has an average urban growth rate of 4.1% a year, over double the global average. Most of the growth occurs in informal slums in which about half of Africa's urban population already lives. While it is clear that Africa's future is urban, much more needs to be done to shape the evolution of its cities, foster collaboration among stakeholders, and fund its urban infrastructure. Globally, urban startups like Uber and Airbnb are drawing in billions of dollars in venture capital, while organizations like Sidewalk Labs, Urban X, and Urban Us are changing cities and helping to scale urban innovations across North America. Africa also needs urban innovation groups actively reimagining its emerging cities and their slums. We aim to establish urban venture studios, city labs in Lagos and Nairobi, and to launch a 2020 Africa Megacity Prize to catalyze the African urban innovation ecosystem. We define urban innovations as those making cities better for the many, not just the few. This could be in terms of service or product innovations across different sectors, productivity gains and cost savings or revenue generation opportunities as long as they have a significant impact on the lives of city dwellers across Africa. We are spotlighting some companies that are already making a significant impact, and we have prioritized companies that are considered high potential, headquartered in Africa, and with a primary focus on Africa. Here are some of the startups shaping the future of cities across the continent. Max NG. Max NG is a motorcycle taxi service operating in 3 Nigerian cities. It has completed over 1 million rides and is one of Jumia's largest delivery partners in West Africa. There are tremendous opportunities for motorcycle taxi services in Africa due to the inefficiencies in mass transit and growing urban populations. Their model provides safe and affordable transportation by offering trained, accountable drivers and the convenience of booking rides through a mobile app. They recently announced $7 million in funding on the only motorcycle taxi service positioning themselves for Africa's electric vehicle future by investing in infrastructure for solar charging stations. This could potentially revolutionize urban mobility as they plan to expand to 10 West African cities. We've talked about this many times on this channel before. The investment is in the infrastructure. Infrastructure is about the investment. Next one is Twiga Foods. Food prices are over 30% higher in sub-Saharan Africa than prices in the rest of the world at comparable GDP levels per capita. Much of this is due to inefficiencies in supply chains and farming practices. Twiga Foods is a digital marketplace that lets grocers in cities order farm produce from smallholder farmers in rural areas across Kenya and have it delivered at competitive prices. This eliminates the inefficiencies of sourcing mostly perishable foods daily while guaranteeing farmers consistent income and timely payments. According to a recent report, Twiga Foods is the largest domestic distributor of food produce in Kenya, servicing 10,000 vendors in Nairobi and neighboring countries through a network of 13,000 farmers. And Pharma is eliminating inefficiencies in the pharmaceuticals supply chain across Africa. These inefficiencies led to consumers paying up to 3 times as much as patients in Western countries. After food, medicine takes up the largest family expenditure for most developing countries. This leads to patients' inability to buy the drugs they need when they need them. And Pharma solves this by sourcing and procuring medicines and stocking pharmacies across Africa at no cost to the pharmacies. They negotiate lower prices with the best manufacturers and also provide flexible payment options for patients. Currently operating in 5 African countries, they manage inventory for a network of over 200 pharmacies and serve more than 40,000 patients each month. So this is this is basically similar to what has been proposed in the United States about single payer, where your pharmaceutical drugs actually come in at the cheapest cost possible, and the insurance company is kind of benefiting from all of this as well, because then they can pay for cheaper meds. All right, the next one is LifeBank. 2/3 of the world's maternal deaths per year occur in sub-Saharan Africa. Most of these are preventable, and many are partly due to a shortage of blood supplies. Life Bank was founded by Temi Giwa Tubelson to deliver much needed medical products such as blood products, oxygen, and vaccines to hospitals across Africa. They have partnered with Google to cut down delivery times to less than 45 minutes using Google Maps, and since 2016 have moved to over 12,000 units of blood to hospitals and screening centers, thereby saving almost 5,000 lives. That's just dope. That's really, really dope, man. All right, this last one is Sendi. Sendi is a parcel delivery service that operates across Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania and links more than 1,000 delivery drivers to customers. The service is used by over 5,000 businesses and 50,000 individuals to make deliveries which are insured and can be tracked in real time from a mobile app. This leads to greater efficiency and reduced costs as it leverages a network of otherwise informally developed employed motorcycle, pickup, van, and truck drivers. It also recently launched a freight service for domestic cargo transport. Again, these startups are dope. Can't say I disagree with any of them.
One problem that we have in the West is that we keep believing the government narrative, the news narrative that we got this indigent on life support place called Africa, that nothing is happening unless we do it for them. And like you're saying, I mean, you're showing, you know, but people don't read. That's one of the big problems. People don't read. Even when they read, those who read don't go any further than what is in front of their face. You know, they read an article in the news, and that's what they believe. They don't go and say, you know what, let me check this out. You know, and then the last part of it is that we don't travel.
But you know, so much of this is us having control over our own media, you know, and really, you know, getting a lot of information out. Now here in the Brain Trust, here we are, you know, this article's being read, this information's being put out there, but this should be something that should be pretty broadly broadcasted across, you know, the community and the diaspora and the diasporan. Why? Because these are business opportunities for us as well. We have to think this way. But this is something that we're not doing, and that's why, once again, we talk about the Byron Allen piece and all that. Why that's so significant? Why there's a lot of significance to this? Because this is the kind of information that, if you had a strong Black media that's out there, and really being able to broadcast across the board, this is not something that should be some revolutionary, you know, H-Rap Brown kind of deal where, you know, you got your fist in the air and your black berets on, you talking about killing whitey. No, this is about talking about putting business together, putting minds together, linking up here, linking up there, coding projects, all that, all the stuff integrates. It all integrates because these are lines that can be connected that could really help all of us economically and politically as well. But that's why it's important to have a media out here, and so we have to be thinking straight as far as you know. BGS did I saw him in the chat here earlier. He did a video, I believe he was talking about, you know, kind of the fall of white supremacy and how it's coming down, how even the French have even kind of admitted this. There's a new paradigm coming down. We have to start thinking along these lines. And some of the people who are out here screaming, this racism and that, and talking all this and saying that we can't do whatever. These are not your friends. We have to go with folks who are thinking more on a three-dimensional level, talking about what's really going on out here, making these connections, and then really helping to kind of build and get this information out a lot more. These are our friends. These are the people who we need to be rolling with. And That's the big picture here. That's how we have to really look at this. This information needs to get out. Africa is not on life support like a lot of people would like to say, and our community here is not on is badly on life support as we would like to say either. There are a lot. We have a lot of competent people in our community as well. So it's about time for us to start making a lot more connections. We push that here on the Black Brain Trust. We're going to continue to push that. And I'm going to keep saying it's like a broken record. Every time I hear it come up, I'm going to say like a broken freaking record, because this is how we have to start to think. We have to start changing a little bit or advancing our mindsets on this, because the opportunities are here and we could take advantage of them immediately, and it could change things around within a generation quickly. It really could. And I know some of us don't believe it, but others have done it. So let's, I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, Zoe Royalty in the chat says, goes to show Africans can be innovative. I wonder in the next decade, Silicon Valley will start hiring Africans, or will China do that? They already have Silicon Africa. So the Africans don't have to go to Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley is already in Africa right now. They just have their own little enclaves. We did a whole entire live stream on that months ago. There's probably 800 incubators inside Africa, if I remember correctly. The last one we covered. So there is no real need to go to Silicon Valley for anything. Silicon Valley is trying to go to Africa right now. That's why you see Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos and those guys traveling to Africa, because that's where all the talent is starting to come out of. They speak English very well because of the former colonialist powers, and they are very innovative because they have to use a lot of ingenuity to solve the issues that's already on the ground there. All right, let me get to this next article from face-to-faceafrica.com. At just 14, this gifted DC boy is a freshman at George Washington University. My dude. A young Black student whose educational progress has taken him further than his classmates is now the talk of the town in Washington, D.C. in the U.S. Curtis Lawrence, who is only 14 years old, has started his freshman year at George Washington University. While most of his age mates are high school freshmen, the young Washington, D.C. native is experiencing campus life. This was made possible due to a program at his high school in the district called School Without Walls. In my university writing class, my professor asked me if I was a visitor or if I was someone's younger brother, Lawrence said. Most of the people that I sit at the tables with, they ask me how old I am and how I am here. So I tell them everything, Lawrence told WJLA. My topic is Africa and African diaspora, he said. When I'm in class, I think of myself as a student. I'm either a high school student or a college student. And then I look in the mirror and I'm like, oh, I look this young, and I keep forgetting that. The gifted boy's mother, Malene Lawrence, please mute yourself if you're not speaking. And her son has loved dinosaurs and paleontology literally since he was 1. And some people think, oh, your kid is going to grow out of that, but you foster that love or whatever it is. So we keep dinosaur books, like we kept tons of nonfiction books in the car, and he would be pronouncing names of dinosaurs, and I was like, how does this kid know this? Lawrence said he wanted to take a larger course load, but his advisor warned against taking on too much in his first semester. At age 10, he took the SATs. He also studied abroad in China, where he stayed with a Chinese family and improved his Mandarin, according to WTOP.com. He was very methodical about planning what classes he would take. Curtis completed the required classes to graduate from high school. Aside from some physical education classes, Malene Lawrence said of her son. Even though the 14-year-old has a few credits left to graduate from high school, thanks to School Without Walls, he was eligible to enroll at George Washington University while still in his high school. While he is the youngest student at School Without Walls to enroll in George Washington University as a freshman, the university says he is currently the youngest student in our traditional undergraduate on-campus program. In university writing class, it took a while for everyone to introduce themselves, and so I recently introduced myself. But up until that point, everyone was really confused about how I was there. And so after that, they were like, oh, that's really cool. And someone else said, you're putting us to shame, Lawrence said. He now looks forward to studying computer science and paleontology at Florida A&M, while his 13-year-old brother, Corey, wants to study to become an astrophysicist at Hampton University. Man, oh man, this dude is on fire. This dude's on another level. I don't care what nobody says. Never count out the black male.
You know, Mike, I think there are a lot more young black men who are gifted just like him, but unfortunately, is not cultivated again. I'm going to keep this brief. Don't want to go into it, but a lot of times there's so much emphasis on basically fostering connections when you're growing up and being considered amongst the cool crowd. Being popular amongst the opposite sex is a concern for a lot of teenagers, for most teenagers, I would imagine. And so a lot of your energy is focused on fostering those social relationships and doing certain things to resonate with your social circles, such as, you know, emphasis on fashion and dancing and things like that, that a lot of emphasis is taken off of your studies and scholastic aspirations. And that's just a consequence of the quote unquote culture that we've developed as a collective, and just that emphasis on things outside of what has long-term tangibility.
Duly noted. I don't even know what to say. I mean, dude's taking up computer science, paleontology. Just he's a hero, man. He's a literal hero. I mean, I know he's being acknowledged, and like Super Trit says, there's probably a lot more than we actually know, but they don't get to shine. These are the type of black males that should be honored, not some dude throwing a brick through a window of a nail salon. I'm sorry, but this is exactly what we need.
That's why we got to have a media out here to really kind of highlight this, because you see what gets attention and what doesn't. You know, there are a lot of
highlighted, Nagon. We have to exalt this type of example. We have to exalt it.
You have to show reverence, like we showed Richard Nixon.
You gotta show reverence. Gotta show reverence to that, because these young cats out there, and he's not alone. And there are quite a few others, but you don't hear about it. But yet you have people saying you're defeated and everything else like that, and you just like I said, dominated or whatever. So we definitely want this kind of thing highlighted, because this is important. And it's great examples. He's not alone. This ain't the only one out there like that. Anyway.
I mean, you Nagon, was just in Harlem at the Children's Zone. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, well, I work with a 5-star tutorial program that works with the Harlem Children's Zone, where you really are getting a lot of education, a lot of special projects and stuff to really get kids to really move forward, academically. And you've got some brilliant young black kids out here, young black boys. Of course, I'm gonna say girls too, because they're girls in there as well. But you got a lot of young black males who are just brilliant, who are up on this science piece, who are technically critical, who are very smart. And I'm talking about young people, 10, 11, 12 years old, brilliant. And I'm back into the tutorial thing again. I want to make sure I put more time into that. And that's why when I come around to this, I'm not sitting around, oh, black people, we're finished, we're done. Some of y'all are finished. But you've got a very sharp crew of youngsters who are coming up who are not. And that's where I place my loyalty and my fealty and my faith in you 40, 50-year-olds, and even some of you late 30-year-olds walking around highly finished attitude. You're done. I ain't fucking with y'all. But those who are on top of the game and are pushing forward and see this thing clearly and are making moves like this and are getting into this science and technology, and you're young, that's where I'm at. That's where I'm at with this, man. That's where I'm at. We're not as we're not as bad as we think. We could certainly be a lot better, and hopefully we can consistently push towards that. But we're not finished.
Mm-hmm.
We're not finished.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just say that.
Go ahead, I just want to just make a quick comment on he's also studying paleontology, which I mean, that's remarkable in itself, because there's not a lot of African Americans in that particular field, and I think that as maybe not in our lifetime, perhaps not even in his lifetime, but at some point, paleontology and archaeology will become even more relevant, because as the technological advancements accumulate, and interstellar travel becomes more of a possibility, as opposed to just fantasy and stuff of movies. Exploring other worlds will be more logical with paleontologists and archaeologists on staff. Somebody who could actually look at artifacts and determine, were there civilizations here, and what was the extent of their intelligence, things of that nature.
Well, Trish, you're making a great point, but see, we even could talk about even in the past, because there's a whole world in the past that you and I have been denied, or those that would like to deny and say that this isn't true, when we start to look into even old Africa and so forth, where and going into North Africa, into the deserts and so forth, and taking a look at where paleontologists and archaeologists are studying and are looking at artifacts and buildings and stuff that they're finding that seem to have been built far, far back in the past than some 5,000 years ago or so, and they're trying to keep a lot of that information down. And in that information is found that you Black people, Black men, and so forth, were not only awesome builders, but maybe many of the philosophies that we have in science and technology today were understood even back then, and that our history goes back a lot farther than what many are saying, and even you having now some of the white paleontologists, but more so archaeologists who are reluctantly having to start agree with some of this, and so that's another big thing. In order to really find out where you're going in the future, you got to kind of know from whence you came, and that's another big piece there. So expanding on your view as far as talking about going into other cultures and societies, and even looking into, let's say, what's outside of the earth, which is huge. We have to take a look at what's here on the earth as well, and from where we came, and much of history that we've been denied.
I think that's even more important to go on, because
huge.
I think that would encourage, or hopefully would encourage, some of the Black youth to really expand on their actual potential. Like I said before, I don't think he's the only one.
No, he certainly isn't.
Example, no. But there's so many more out there that there's so much untapped potential, and if people were encouraged and say, you know what, we have a history beyond just slavery. People know that, and I would think that would encourage people to, there's more to life than what I'm doing now.
And, he also mentioned that he came into the college being pro-Black. He's 14 years old, coming into the college talking about he's pro-Black. He was a Pan-Africanist more so than some of these other networks that you see on the manosphere.
Because he's doing the work.
Yeah. But then again, he's putting in real hardcore academic study. He's putting a lot.
Yeah, he's doing the work. He's not just talking about it, he's being about it. It's a big difference.
Yeah. He's on a different evolutionary path.
I gotta I don't even know how you compensate a black male of this character, of this sort of fortitude, man. I mean, this is on another level, man. I mean, computer science at 14.
You know,
I got into computers probably around 7 or 8 years old, and that was like a Tandy. And by the time I was 14, I was building my first one. I was building my first computer. This dude is already into computer science. I mean, he's into CS 101, which is intro to computer science. This at 14,
so
I wasn't even
Mike,
thinking about that.
so this is what they mean when they say dominated.
Oh yeah, I
Oh,
think
okay.
so.
I was just curious.
I think so. He's dominated. I mean, he goes to George Washington University.
Well, always remember, like my father said, consider the source. Just consider the source from whence that came, from where that came from. Just consider the source.
That dude is my hero, man. For this week at least, man. Until something else usurps him from his position, man. He is my hero, man.
Yeah. He's rocking and rolling. He's rocking and rolling, no doubt. Great story.
All right, let me get to this next article. Oh, let me bring this next person onto the panel.
Hey, what's good, everybody?
Hey, what's going on, dude?
Hey, not too much.
All right, this next one is from the nationalreview.com. We can't afford to forget Africa. Most Americans don't spend time giving much thought to Africa, but from my recent trip to Africa, I think they should. 20 years ago, the Venerable Economist magazine called it the hopeless continent. Even today, stories of poverty, disease, dictatorial states, and corruption often engender feelings of fatalism and or exasperation. Here is what many people are missing. Information technology, especially mobile phones, is connecting the African farmers and producers to new markets, and the continent is now a major buyer of consumer goods from around the world. Better health outcomes mean that Africa's share of the world population is projected to grow from 16% in 2015 to 25% in 2050 and 39% by 2100. We cannot ignore the fact that most of the world's new labor force will be African in the future. China and Africa. Stupid advertisers. China and Russia are dramatically expanding their influence in Africa, and according to National Security Advisor John Bolton, their efforts to lock down strategic minerals and forge military ties with weak governments pose a significant threat to U.S. national security interests. An astounding 39 of 54 African nations have signed on to Beijing's Belt and Road Initiative, a $1 trillion plan that would make China a dominant economic player on the continent. An estimated 25% of China's total oil imports currently come from Africa. I recently visited several African countries ranging from Zambia to Zimbabwe to Ethiopia and can attest that the humanitarian work being done there is not only important on a heartfelt personal level, it's also making more Africans self-sufficient and less likely to once again fall prey to foreign powers. Take Zambia, where Family Legacy, a Dallas-based Christian ministry, runs an amazing network of schools along with an orphan care facility. It has 26 schools in and around the capital city of Lusaka, educating 15,000 children. It also runs the Tree of Life Children's Village, which has 64 purpose-built houses that provide 800 orphans with their own beds, 3 meals a day, and a safe place to grow up. Orphans are a heart-wrenching reminder of Africa's challenges. Close to a quarter of African youth are considered orphaned, in many cases because of the AIDS epidemic that ravaged the continent. In Zambia, AIDS killed an entire generation of parents, leaving the country with half of its population under the age of 18. Even today, 1.2 million Zambians have HIV, out of a population of just 17 million. The orphans of Zambia mostly eke out a living in shanty towns where they fend for themselves, sleeping in rudimentary shacks or under plastic wraps. Walking through Boroko Market, a shantytown in Lusaka, I met Tafika, a charming, albeit shy 12-year-old. I want, I want to go to school. I plan to have a future, she told me. She knows she will have to work hard for a new life, but she is determined to seek it. For some dramatic pictures of Tafika's shantytown, see this article by David Mato, Matos, Matosco. One of the reasons that Family Legacy has so much support from overseas is that it brings hundreds of volunteers, many from North Texas to Lusaka every summer to help run Camp Life. Each U.S. volunteer is responsible for the well-being and spiritual guidance of 10 orphans. Their tasks can range from helping a girl plant her fingernails or paint her fingernails for the first time to holding a child's hand as he visits the doctor to introducing a kid to children's books. Andrew White is the son of a former Texas governor and a successful businessman in his own right. He brought his family to Zambia this summer in part to show them that their faith is more than something you do on Sunday morning. We get to see God work miracles in the lives of both kids and Americans who come here, he told me. The people here are preparing these kids for life, and that's quite a gift to them. What's going on with this? Zambia discourages foreigners from adopting its orphans, fearing that a large exodus would mean a brain drain. That strikes me as wise. I met many children who could grow up to be the country's teachers, traders, lawyers, and doctors. The future of Zambia and all of Africa depends on allowing its human talent to reach its full potential. Holly Scurry is a native Texan who has lived in Zambia for years, working as Family Legacy's senior vice president. She embodies the biblical call in the book of James for people of faith to visit the widows of the orphans in their distress. Watching her energetically lead an auditorium full of excited children in song and dance is to understand just how much doing good works can make one feel full of purpose. It's amazing what many of these kids can accomplish if we provide the building blocks, she told me. We like the spark, they carry it forward. So, I mean, we've been beating this drum for quite some time that you can't forget about the continent because there's so much activity and growth going on over there. And what we're seeing is people going there and they're coming back and they're saying, yep, this is what's going on over here. I can confirm. Africa will be close to 50% of the world's population in the next 80 years. So where does that leave ADOS? This is the perfect opportunity for ADOS to integrate themselves into the development of the continent itself. And considering that the continent will probably be a superpower within our lifetime, it's a perfect opportunity to actually join hands with them. At least from, yeah, go ahead.
No, you're hitting it right ahead. That's what I'm saying. People talk 2053 and all that. Yeah, that's on the way. But see, there's ways to turn things around and really get things going. We have to be thinking this way. It's very important. That's why I say when we hear people talking against it, you have to look at them and say these people are definitely not thinking clearly. They're not thinking right. They are definitely not thinking clearly. Their minds are not right on this. Mm-hmm. And the numbers are just there.
Never actually, put boots on the ground. So you really can't take them seriously.
Boots on the ground,
yeah.
or does flip flops count too?
Flip flops.
Well,
I don't care if you're barefoot. You need to get on a plane, get on a boat, something. Go over there and then make an assessment.
well, you have
A
a lot.
lot of people, a lot of our people don't even think nationally. I mean, you got every 4 years they come out and go vote for whoever, Jesse Jackson or somebody that they consider a black leader. Tell them to vote for. Hillary Clinton was the last, you know, we wanted the angel, and Hillary Clinton was our angel. A lot of us don't even move off the block. So you got to start thinking um, internationally now. I mean, and the problem is that the technology is moving so fast that by the time a lot of us get spun up, you know, it's going to have to be our children. Like that 14-year-old that we were just talking about in the article, is going to have to be our children who kind of like jump in. I mean, their cell phone's going to help them connect to people in the continent before we get on an airplane and go over
I mean, I
like over
I
there.
mean, we're going to have to think about this because I mean, we did have I would just I don't watch all these videos that these people have out here too much these days. I'm not really watching a lot of this stuff, but I did see there was a passport gate. Was there a passport gate going on over here? People
Oh yeah.
getting tight about people with passports and all that. I mean, you got to look at some of this extraordinary parochial local yokel thinking that we have. Got to get out of that mindset. That's not a winning policy. So we're gonna have to think beyond that. Passport gate, these kind of things have to come to an end. We have to really start to broaden our horizons in that regard as well. So let's talk against that kind of stuff and really talk about getting your passports and traveling more and even from a fun perspective, because what you find is fun may turn into something even that much more significant for you down the line. So
Yeah.
we
If we
need
go
to
back to
definitely.
history, if we go back to history, just look at British history. The British were these people on an island that the rest of Europe used to treat like football. You know what I'm saying? And it's only after the British started traveling, then they start getting into the international scene, and how quickly Britain rose from a nation that was, barefoot and pregnant, as we would call it, to being a part of the world scene and then dominating it. Within 100 years. So we as black people got to start thinking, and start doing.
Gabe, do you have anything you want to add to this?
No, nothing to this one. No.
Oh, okay. All right, this next one is from AlJazeera.com. Africa's next decolonization battle should be about knowledge. The process of undoing the effects of colonialism has never been easy. However, at least there has been some sort of progress thanks to the advent of social media platforms, which are enabling Africans to reframe the narratives about them. Yet, the journey towards total decolonization remains long and treacherous. In the age of information and knowledge, control of the latter is another yardstick for measuring whether one is colonized or decolonized. Sadly, in this regard, the African continent remains colonized. The next battle for Africa's decolonization should be about the promotion and protection of local knowledge. To this end, we first need to understand how and why we are still colonized. The next step should be about the process of dismantling the pernicious vestige of the colonial era. Generally speaking, doing academic fieldwork in Africa, for example, still relies on colonial practices of a white man going to find information in remote African places, inhabited by vulnerable and underdeveloped communities. The end goal is to bring back home stories of the colonized, while demographics of researchers continues to change, new researchers mimic colonial practices in collecting data. In his quest for information, the foreign researcher cannot do this alone. Enter the crucial role of a local knowledge broker who is paid to guide the researcher to study these contexts. In most cases, the foreign researcher ends up being labeled an expert, while the local assistant's voice is either silent or silenced. In some cases, especially when the study touches on sensitive topics, the foreign researcher can travel back to their home country, but often leaving the assistant's safety in their community compromised. The two difficult questions then remain. How do we recognize these local associates, agencies, and studies? How do we ensure their safety during and after data collection? These are some of the questions explored in the study recently published in the International Journal of Qualitative Methods on the plight of the so-called research assistants and respondents in northern Uganda. Jacob, one of the participants in the study, told us a couple of horrifying stories about his experiences working with Western researchers in different districts of northern Uganda during and after conflict. He recounted one of these experiences. We had finished doing a study on corruption in the police force. The policeman we had interviewed maybe reported us it was bad. Then someone stole my computer, my flash disk from home. It got bad when I was harassed and accused of sending intelligence to outsiders. Then I was arrested for a few days, said Jacob, not his real name, a research fixer in northern Uganda. After various post-independent wars in the northern region of Uganda, including the violence committed by the Lords of Resistance Army and other groups, stories of violence and displacement in districts in this part of Uganda received international attention. Many researchers, seasoned and inexperienced ones using the disaster to launch their careers from different parts of the world, were among those who joined the usual humanitarian workers, conflict entrepreneurs who fought in Gulu and other surrounding areas. Conflict entrepreneurs. Got to make sure I take that mental note. Jacob worked with many of them during and after the conflict. His ordeal led me to investigate not only the safety issues that have been experienced in the region's context, but also research fatigue and power dynamics that exist between principal investigators and assistants. I was motivated to do this study not only because I too was a local research assistant once, but because when I read reflections of Western researchers on their safety concerns and other dilemmas they face in these sensitive contexts, I found their earnest attempts at self-reflection have often transformed into navel-gazing. I hardly found, for example, any mentions of stories or safety issues of the silent and silenced voices who accompany them. Their voices and stories have been silenced in what has been referred to as the black market of knowledge production. I agree with the Liberian academic and activist Dr. Draptor Nijai Paley, whose recent article, How to Truly Decolonize the Study of Africa, points out that the current wave of scholarly decolonial turn should not be detached from day-to-day dilemmas of people in formerly colonized spaces and places. These people include local researchers like Jacob. To decolonize fieldwork, we need to consider the three things. First, foreign researchers need to decenter power, decenter class, decenter gender, and decolonize ethical and methodological training and practices before, during, and after their fieldwork. Second, research assistants and other local leaders or ethics committees need to establish guidelines for foreign researchers to follow when hiring a research assistant and to enforce them. Where they do not exist or authorities are at the center of the study, like in Jacob's situation, research assistants need to create associations to protect themselves as a collective. Finally, the Malawian American historian Professor Paul Zelza, Zelza points out Africans, and in this case, research associates, need to develop the means to generate value and disseminate their own forms of knowledge. And he, the Nigerian British academic, feminist, and writer, Professor Amina Mama's advice to better acknowledge African intellectual production, past and present, as we face newer challenges posed by globalization and its attendant effects in the arena of knowledge production. Intellectuals include these silent and silenced voices. Interesting. Can't say I disagree with this, despite the feminists.
Well, one of the problems Africa has is that most governments don't want to know information about what's going on in their country, and they don't want the knowledge being accepted because
Mhm.
then the people wouldn't accept them for very long if they can't fix the problems. And the information that the collectors have, they are not. Say you're African and you're walking around with this British guy. You're not allowed to publish your information along, what you found. He can go back to England and publish his information for the international community. You can't publish your information because the government's going to come down on you hard. They
Mhm.
don't want nobody in the country. They don't want anybody in the country knowing, the information. They don't want widespread, which is very bad because it can help to. It's like the census, for instance, in the United States.
Mhm.
So much information is divested from the census, not only the amount of people that live in one area, but their education, marital status, family members, how many children are going to school. All that information can be used by the government or other agencies that are going to build up the country. People
Mhm.
who want to start a business, you know, will know what kind of business to put in what community. But a lot of African governments don't want that information known.
Mhm. All right, this next one is from the Daily Maverick. Ramaphosa's envoy arrive in Nigeria in Pan-African reconciliation bid. President Cyril Ramaphosa on Monday, September 16th, continued to condemn attacks on foreigners as the envoy he has tasked with visiting 7 African countries to improve South Africa's image on the continent arrived in Nigeria. There is no excuse whatsoever for violence. The criminality and the looting that was brought upon the homes and businesses of foreign nationals is something that is totally unacceptable. Under the president, speaking at the South African Clothing and Textile Workers Union Congress in Durban. This nation knows all too well the trauma and the pain that intolerance and discrimination brings, and we will not inflict such trauma on anyone else. Immigrants must not be made into scapegoats, nor must we take our legitimate frustration with the slow pace of economic and social reform out of immigrants who come to our country, he continued. Ramaphosa has been attempting to improve South Africa's international reputation after the mob violence and looting targeted particularly at foreigners from other African countries, erupted in parts of Gauteng at the beginning of September, leaving 12 people dead, 10 of whom were South African. The president was booed on Saturday at the memorial for former Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe in Harare, but won favor with the crowd after apologizing for the recent spat of violence. It was only when I said I regret what is happening in our country and offered an apology on behalf of all of us as South Africa. That is when they responded positively in accepting the apology. I have apologized on your behalf, and I hope that will sink into our consciousness, Ramaphosa said on Monday. The presidency on Sunday announced it was sending former Minister Jeff Radib and Ambassador Kingsley Mbolo and ANC veteran Dr. Kulu Mbata to Nigeria, Niger, Ghana, Senegal, Tanzania, Democratic Republic of Congo, and Zambia to reassure the government South Africa was committed to Pan-African unity, the rule of law, and holding those responsible for the violence accountable. Radib and Mbata are understood to have arrived in Nigeria. News agency of Nigeria on Monday reported that Radib had met President Buhari in a closed meeting at the presidential villa in Abuja. So I'm not going to read this whole thing because I think we've already covered this before, but I don't know. I think that when it comes to this sort of what they consider xenophobia, which I don't see how this is xenophobia at all. I think that these are just a lot of desperate, angry people who really have too much time on their hands, and their police in the local police force is kind of useless against them. They should have some kind of welfare system in place to subsidize, the cost of living for some of these people. South Africa is a part of the BRICS. They're a major. In fact, they have the #1 economy in Africa. So I'm not sure why they're having this issue at all. Nigeria has #2 economy, although some will argue that Nigeria's economy is actually exponentially bigger than South Africa's. But whether it's 1 or 2, it's still within the top 5 on the continent out of 54 countries. I'm not sure why South Africa as a nation is having this issue.
The problem goes beyond poverty. One is the government itself. The ANC is afraid to act on behalf of Black people in South Africa for fear of the Europeans and America. And, well, the wealthy people in South Africa, even though people look at them as Boers, there are some people in South Africa that you can't do. There's some people who most African governments couldn't act unless they get their approval. And I can't name names, but if I name some of the biggest name in American and British businesses, you guys would know. And they run some of the biggest financial institutions on the planet. But this issue that we're dealing with right now has to do with the land redistribution and the Boers. And the people that the Boers brought in to teach them how to cause disturbance in South Africa. This is a gang. This is a thing that the Boers and their handlers created gangs in South Africa to disrupt the economic system. And until we see it, the whole story, I'm just seeing snippets of the story. And until we see the whole story, people are not going to believe exactly what happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, BGS in the chat says that the Chinese will have to handle it. Will the BRICS remove their membership? Nah, the BRICS aren't going to remove South Africa's membership over this, because if that's the case, a lot of other members of the BRICS, either whether they're main members or observer members, would have to be removed as well. That's not going to happen. What will happen is the military will have to crack down on all of that stuff. They'll have to occupy those areas and put the military to actually good use, since they're not doing anything else at the moment.
Yeah, but the military is still, the higher ranks of the military are still Boers.
Man, it's crazy. Kind of how
That's
I see
one
it.
of the big problems they have. It's until Africa has a Southern Africa, create some kind of like a task force that can investigate where these hands are coming from,
Mhm.
and then prosecute them, take the people out, this thing is going to continue. It's unfortunately for South Africa, it is happening in South Africa.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
kind of see this. It seems like the same narrative. I'm not heavy into geopolitics, but the same type of geopolitical narrative plays out in so many different countries where there's always this political upheaval, political strife that's happening with the government, right? And it just seems as if always those who are less in power are the ones who suffer, right? Through the killings, through corrupt governments, through just unstable economics within places. And it just seems like the same narrative plays itself out in, I mean, just over history and continually plays itself out over history,
Mhm.
where those who suffer extensively, and those who are in power have everything to gain in that process. And they just say little things in order to kind of calm the the storm of the those who are not in power's anger, and I don't know. It just feel like it's more of a human thing, right? Who
They
knows
seem to.
what the answer is? Yep.
No, I was just going to say they seem to run South Africa in the same way they ran Detroit under
What's
Kwame
that?
Kilpatrick. No, I was saying that they seem to
Yeah.
run South Africa in the same way they run Detroit.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
of his particular corruption.
yeah.
Oh, all right.
Well, I'm just making a slight reference in jest, but
Sure. Yeah. Oh, no worries.
mhm,
Nah, because man, we've been hearing it for years, man.
mhm,
But yeah.
yeah. All right, let me get to this next article. All right, this one is from the Mast Online. Mugabe was a Pan-African icon, says Mutati. MMD faction president Felix Mutati says there is no African country that is larger than the other. He also says late Zimbabwe President Robert Mugabe's legacy should not be diluted with social economic deficits faced by that country. Mutate, a former finance minister in the PF government of President Edgar Lungu, attended mass at Intender Catholic Church in Lusaka yesterday. We must thank God for his mercy, protection, and above all, the gift of life, Mutati said soon after coming out of the church service. Asked about the issue of xenophobia against Africans in South Africa, Mutati said it was a worrying tide of hate, intolerance, and that is being inflicted upon fellow Africans. He noted that Dr. Kenneth Kawanda and his colleagues relentlessly fought against apartheid in South Africa. Let us not lose the sacrifices that were given to our brothers and sisters in South Africa through meaningless attacks on fellow Africans. My prayer is that the government of South Africa should take prompt and immediate decisive action to stop these attacks, Mutati said. Mutati indicated further, advising Africans to foster fellowship among themselves across the continent. Let's not separate each other by country. Let's be unified for one cause. Ultimately, as Africans, we are one. We'll always depend on each other. There is no country in Africa that is greater than the other. You can't survive alone. So the call is that of action. Mugabe, who died age 95 in Singapore on Friday, September 6, 2019, Mutati pointed out that he was a liberation icon. He was a Pan-African icon who fought the cause of Africa against colonialism, Mutati observed. His legacy must not be diluted by the deficits in terms of the economy, the social framework, but he should be remembered that he sacrificed his life in order to liberate Zimbabwe. He added that Mugabe was a constant irritation, particularly to the West, because he stood for the cause of Africa. I remember that one of his famous phrases was that former British Prime Minister Tony Blair, keep keep your Britain, I'll keep my Zimbabwe. He guarded his problems jealously, and for the African leaders, there is something to learn from him, noted Mutati. Like I said, let's not only focus on the deficits. There is no country in Africa and across the world that is not faced with one form of another of challenges. What is much more important are the efforts that we do in order to minimize the efforts. Can't say I disagree with him. So I think there are so many people who criticize Mugabe and say, "Oh, he was a dictator, he was a despot, he was this, he was that," but they have nothing to say about Ronald Reagan. You know, Ronald Reagan has either a warship named after him in the airport, and no one seems to question the mess that we're in today as being a part of Ronald Reagan's great initiative in the '80s. What about Bush? How many people died in the Iraq War under Bush, or and so on and so forth? You know, Nixon and the rest of these guys. All of these American presidents are revered despite all of the racism and imperialist ideas that they waged against non-white people. I just find that to be interesting that somehow, some way, that you're able to carve these people's faces into a mountain. Meanwhile, Thomas Jefferson was running around with an underage woman and no underage female, and no one seems to have a problem with that. So much for the Me Too movement. All right, this one is from GhanaWeb.com. Mugabe was a pioneer of black assertiveness. Rawlings eulogies former president and leader, Zimbabwean leader. Let's bring this out. Former President Jerry John Rawlings has paid glowing tribute to former Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe, describing the famous Pan-Africanist as a untiring steward of African progress and a pioneer of black assertiveness, ABC News can report. Rawlings, who led an official government of Ghana delegation to the funeral of Mugabe on Saturday, in tributes described the late Mugabe as one of the continent's most inspiring liberation fighters whose exploits would always be remembered. Our tears flow freely and uncontrollably for our departed hero, an untiring steward of African progress, a pioneer of black assertiveness, and an implacable opponent of neocolonialism. We salute his memory as his soul marches on to join the great patriarchs of our continent in eternity, he said. Mr. Rawlings further eulogized Mr. Mugabe, stressing that he was not only a popular and fearless liberation fighter. Mugabe was not only a teacher, but most of all, an impressive moral compass. He said until Mugabe's demise, he had consistently demonstrated his steadfast commitment to the shared vision of Africa in line with the Agenda 2063 strategy document, a commitment he demonstrated at important international gatherings such as the AU Summit and the UN General Assembly. Those who are familiar with the tragedies that have characterized much of Africa's post-independence era will no doubt appreciate how the burning desire of Robert Mugabe to end colonial exploitation earned him the wrath of the same aggressive foreign interests that were responsible for discrediting and destabilizing most of our progress progressive rulers, he said. Mr. Mugabe, 95, died on the 6th of September 2019 in a hospital in Singapore where he had been receiving treatment since April. Mr. Mugabe was Zimbabwe's first leader after the country became independent in 1980. He held on to power for almost 4 decades before being ousted in a coup in 2017. Ghana's delegation to the state funeral service for the late Robert Mugabe, held at National Sports Stadium in Harare, also included the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs and Regional Integration, Charles Orudu, a nephew of the late Sally Mugabe, Mr. Kwesi Ninsen Mbia, and officials of the Foreign Ministry. Our enduring affection for Robert Mugabe was equally rooted in the strong bonds of brotherhood that derived not only from his growing up, studying, and teaching in Ghana, but also from marrying a Ghanaian lady called Sally Francesca Hayfron, the wife of his youth, now interred in the Heroes of Acre here in Harare, supported him with youthful passion, energy, and wit as he wrestled with his native Zimbabwe from the throes of ruthless colonialism. Though Zimbabwe, unlike most African countries, shed the yoke of colonialism in 1980 through Robert Mugabe's outstanding leadership, the country came to assume a prominent and inviolable status globally shortly after attaining independence. Until his demise, President Mugabe had consistently demonstrated his steadfast commitment to our shared vision of Africa we want, as defined in the 2063 strategy document. So nothing but positive praise for Robert Mugabe. All right, this last one is from Pendula.co. Uhuru Kenyatta hails Mugabe as an embodiment of the Pan-African spirit. Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta on Saturday hailed the late former Zimbabwe President Robert Mugabe for his solidarity with other African countries in their fight against colonialism and apartheid. Speaking to mourners who had gathered at the National Sports Stadium for Mugabe's state-assisted funeral, Kenyatta said, "The late Comrade Mugabe was an embodiment of the Pan-African spirit, offering immeasurable assistance and solidarity to many other African countries in their struggles to end colonial rule and apartheid. The late President Mugabe has left an indelible mark on the history of Zimbabwe and the African continent at large. Through his political astuteness and zeal for the political and economic liberation of Africa. As an African leader and intellectual giant, he was firm and steadfast regarding Africa's quest to address the challenges facing the continent. He was unwavering in his instance that Africa's problems demanded African solutions. As African leaders, we should continue to champion African interests as an enduring tribute to the late Comrade Mugabe and other departed icons of the African political and economic liberation struggle." No disagreements from there. And then we'll just open it up for the next 20 minutes. See what's being said in the chat. Yeah, I haven't heard anything from Tariq Nasheed either, pro woman. I haven't heard anything. Tariq was actually over there, I think, a year or so ago. Um, and he had nothing but high praise to say about Zimbabwe because initially he went into it calling it Zimbabwe, and that was never the case. They told him to come over here and see for himself, and he went over there and he came back with a lot of positive messages about it. So it sounds to me like he had a positive experience in dealing with the nation, and said that he wanted to go back and actually do business there. So it'd be interesting to see what Farrakhan says and what Tariq says. I haven't seen anything posted from him at all. I haven't seen anything from Dr. Umar Johnson either. So, and nothing really from the conscious community, at least from a digital standpoint. I haven't seen them really speak out. Yeah. So I mean, people. I hope people can hear me because oh, Thalia. Okay.
Yeah, you good, Mike. I can hear you. Yeah.
Yeah. We talk about the title of this live stream is benchmark of masculinity, Mugabe's legacy. So a lot of what you hear in the manosphere and even on the ground here in America is this idea that you're going to overthrow the pale skinned people and you're going to assert yourself in charge. That's exactly what Mugabe did in Zimbabwe. He fought all the way from Mozambique all the way back into the into Rhodesia and then overthrew the government. I mean, yeah, he got help from the Chinese and the North Koreans and the Vietnamese, but at the same time, um, I would say Cuba too. I think Cuba played
Yeah,
like
Cuba. Everybody forgets Cuba plays a vital role in a lot of the movements in Africa. And if nobody does the history on Cuba, it's just as important as in Haiti. That's why they got the embargo on Cuba, as well as they're trying to suffocate Haiti's economy.
yeah.
And that's excellent point. Cuba's been one of the most influential small countries in the hemisphere, and really kind of around the world, than almost in any country you can speak of. They very they played a major role in Africa as well as in the Americas as well. So Cuba's.
Yeah, this is a picture of Mugabe and Castro together. So
Yeah,
that shows.
It's all about political game. It's just that what you're seeing now is like everybody's talking about the woke generation. We're living in it, not through not just the internet alone, but on the ground. You're seeing a lot of things coming to light, and those who are in power don't have the influence they used to have anymore. So, just listening to the BGS segment and about the white supremacy is ending, calling like the President Macron doing his speech and the whole thing, and about the Anglo Zionists. And I said, yeah, what's happening is you're seeing a rude awakening with a lot of these people who call themselves white, and now they're going back to where they usually became, just tribalistic. There's a lot of tension amongst them. So you're seeing the building block that was really never solidified being broken down. With Mugabe, all respects to him and Gaddafi, and a lot of people like Patrice Lumumba, and all these people are trying to liberate. And what happens is, even Lula, you can even go back to Lula and what's the female president they try to overthrow, the one they overthrow,
Rousseff.
Dilma. Yeah, Dilma Rousseff. What you're seeing is a major shift and a lot of retaliation. And what's happening is these white elites don't have that same kind of power they used to. everybody's seeing the bullshit. That's what it is.
Mhm.
And it's gonna come to blows. You're seeing it more now than ever because I was just saying it with my cousin. I said this is
Mhm.
2019. Motherfuckers ain't playing no more.
Mhm.
So
Well, a lot of people in certain people in the manosphere want to talk about, educated lames and guys going to HBCUs and being educated lames, and they
that
ain't about nothing,
I mean,
right? Let me finish this, Thalia. They and I heard this morning too. Early this morning on another live stream that these guys are just educated lames. They're not really about nothing. Mugabe was a teacher, highly educated, but he wasn't afraid. He wasn't afraid to pick up that Kalashnikov and go to war. These other guys sit behind a keyboard and they push keys. That's what they do. That keyboard warriors. That's their idea of being a warrior. This guy was an actual warrior who taught students from Ghana and Rhodesia at the time, and was born in the country that he later overthrew as an adult to come back and rename the country what it is today, Zimbabwe, and lead the charge. And Zimbabwe was or had the highest literacy rate of all the rest of the countries in Africa on the continent. How many of these other guys who sit on YouTube talking about they cook people can attest to that?
not one iota.
Hmm.
But that's the thing. It's just it's now you're gonna come to see where the rubber meets the road because now since YouTube is doing a lockdown, a lot of this mess, you're gonna see it. You're gonna
Hmm.
see it, and this is why like groups like you guys, people that are speaking out the junk that's out. I was just listening to what's it, The Breakfast Club, and hearing Fantasia talk about how women need to stop. Like you already seeing the change in the women. You know, you're already seeing the change. It's arduous process,
Hmm.
but it's a process nonetheless, and no process is easy. But yeah, shout out to Mugabe. Shout out to a lot of these leaders out here.
Hmm.
They're not perfect, but they try their damnedest to sacrifice so for the betterment of the future.
Hmm. Yeah, BGS in the chat says Nkura was also a teacher. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, he was, and a lot of them were teachers. If you think about Castro was a doctor, if I remember
yeah.
correctly. There's another one that escapes my mind as well. I think Mandela was a lawyer, if I remember correctly. He was a lawyer.
Yeah. Yeah, what you're seeing is a lot of these changes are coming,
Hmm.
and it's not gonna look pretty for Europe. That's for sure. It's either if they go to Russia, that they're gonna have to stick to Russia because Russia's making moves in Saudi Arabia. Says a lot.
Well, Russia is a superpower, but it's a
Yeah,
little bit different than when you're talking about the liberated countries. They
yeah.
have a
And
long
what
way
I'm
to go.
saying, yeah, what I'm saying is Europe is going to suffer a lot. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, Castro was a lawyer. I knew he had a PhD. I wasn't sure what it exactly it was in. Um,
A lot of people don't see the events in Europe because the news thrown this veneer of I don't know how to put it, the untouchable over Europe.
mhm.
And even though you look at places like Germany, Germany has got one of the best, is the best manufacturer in Europe, but Germany has deep seated problems that if they can't maintain that leadership role in manufacturing, um, it's going to look it's going to look as though Germany
Mhm.
is a basket case like Greece, because what has happened before is that Germany was a carefully scripted, I don't know, garden type.
Mhm.
If I can explain it like that, it's like a manicured garden,
Mhm.
and it the you know, once you walk through, you walk around the garden, it looks okay, but when you go inside the house is a mess, and that's what Europe is.
Mhm.
The only thing that's keeping Europe in a kind of stable way is America, and now that America is like become a victim of its own no embellished you
Own
know
mess.
well, yeah.
Like it's basically the analogy I said how America's the white man that shot himself because he knows he's not the original person on that land.
Yeah, yeah. BGS says Putin was an engineer. Yeah, and I was also mistaken. Che Guevara was a doctor, and
Yeah.
not Castro. But they both had PhDs or something like that to that effect. But the point that I'm making here is that and just to address one point that he says Putin was an engineer. If I remember correctly, Putin was a political science major. I saw the interview with his former professors on RT, and they said that he majored in political science. But I could be wrong about this. But I did see their interviews on RT about a year or so ago, or 2 years ago, when they interviewed his professors, and they asked about Putin. They said that dude was extremely intelligent at 18, 19 years old. Extremely intelligent for his age. So, and he's MGTOW for whatever reason.
He's big child. It's funny.
That's what he says. You know, I think they asked him something recently about when are you going to get married. He just kind of scoffed at them. No, he says no, I'm MGTOW. Yeah, Martin was a PhD. Patrice Lumumba, I think he was. I think he had a master's degree or something to that effect, if I remember correctly. I think he got his PhD after he got out of jail.
Yeah.
Keep in mind that Mugabe spent 10 years in jail before he got out and actually did what he did.
Yeah.
These sort of liberation struggles were led by people who were highly focused and highly educated. They weren't the Pookies and the Ray Rays. That didn't happen. There's this romanticizing in the black community in America that somehow, some way, that the guy who's selling bags of weed is going to come back and overthrow the mayor of St. Louis or something like that, or the mayor of Chicago. It's just really fanciful ideas that these people have, really romanticizing the struggle in order to get more Patreons, more subscribers, and more Cash Apps and super chats. And I'm here to tell you that you are a fraud.
Well, it's all relative to the expectations of the individual in question. Like if you look at just human beings' fascination with animals, and we often seek out human-like characteristics in animals. In particular, if we see, for instance, a crow using tools, we marvel at a crow's ability to use even the most rudimentary tools in the most rudimentary ways. But again, when we actually evaluate that situation further, it's very simplistic and elementary. Mm-hmm. But because it's a crow and we don't expect the crow to do that, this is the reason why we're in such awe. So when we look at the quote unquote Pookies and Ray Rays and ask ourselves, what are their actual contributions and are they tangible to this day? We're left scratching our heads because it really is something, again, rudimentary. But because we look at the individual in question, this is the reason why there's that awe and reverence. Whereas the people who are the quote unquote educated lames, the bar is set so high for them when they actually do produce, mm-hmm. is we scoff at it because we actually expect more. We want more from them.
Mm-hmm. Good point.
True.
But now it's the problem is that the sentiment on YouTube apparently is that the educated lames have basically turned their back on the community. The educated lames sold out the black community.
Right.
That's the latest news.
Yeah, Robert F. Smith is somehow selling out for what he did at for what he's doing.
Well, for all it's worth,
Byron Allen as
I
well.
think one thing that's really
Yeah. It just leads me back to that old
I was gonna say,
story. Oh,
Go ahead, Gabe.
you go ahead.
Okay.
For me?
Go ahead, Leah, finish your point, and then Gabe will
I
go
was
after.
just saying that it kind of reminded me of the 40 years in the wilderness. That's what it reminds me.
Mm-hmm.
That analogy, so it's gonna take a generation to die off for the next generation to pass the mantle and lead to the promised land. That kind of analogy.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Go ahead, Gabe.
I was gonna say, I think one thing that's really interesting is that it's so funny. So many people say different things or have criticisms of individuals who I guess fall into that category of the educated lane, but you typically don't ever hear a response back from them. They don't say anything back. Like, they're just not bothered. They're just kind of in their own lanes, progressing, going forward with really ignoring commentary from those who really don't make a difference.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily.
Have you heard any type of commentary come back from Ben Carson, from what individuals have said about him, I guess, since his recent, I guess, quote unquote, immersion as a conservative? Has he said anything back?
I think he has said some stuff back. He does have quite a few interviews if you look on YouTube. I don't really follow him too much, but I have seen interviews where he has addressed some of these points. But
so he, I don't know. I haven't heard. I follow him pretty closely, and I don't hear anything. I haven't heard anything of him addressing, those individuals who are like adamantly against him. Of course, political discussions and
in what way are they against him though?
Well, no, which you were just speaking of, like those individuals who are educated. So I guess more towards my point of, you really don't hear a lot of, back and forth between those who are quote unquote succeeding in the Black community and those who are against those individuals.
Well, because he's removed. He's removed from that, right? But what happens when you have because he's physically removed from it. He's not involved. He's not involved in the community in that aspect. Not saying that he's a sellout or anything. I'm saying he's not physically involved in the same environment where the criticism is coming from. So he doesn't have to actually address it head on. But for those who did not get out, they are actually going through that. We've had many people come to this hangout and have said the same exact thing, that this is what they battle with. I believe there was an article, not an article, I think Hill Harper talked about this on YouTube some years ago, about this whole educated lame thing, because that really started in their sector. When what's her face? Sherry Shepherd called him an educated lame. He was corny, he was lame. Just because he had a degree didn't mean anything. Now he's successful. Now all of a sudden it's what's up with him and what are you really doing and all this other stuff. So that's really where all this criticism comes from.
But it's not like anything. So there's something that YouTube portrays as it concerns the back and forth, but there really isn't any substantial back and forth. Like, these dudes are really so focused on doing what they need to do in order to continue to succeed, and they're not really focusing on what anybody else is really saying. They're just, you don't hear like forums or any debates, anything official that really comes out.
Well, CNN Black in America under Soledad O'Brien in season 1. But just the point of the matter is they had that discussion, right? So the idea that it's not happening is a bit false, and it's on the surface, because we've heard people actually come out and say these type of things. It's not like people are not having these conversations. I mean, you may not see the back and forth, but
that's what I'm speaking of. That's exactly what I mentioned. The back and forth. There isn't really.
I've seen it. Sorry.
Ooh, tell me of where or who or.
Oh, back in middle school, I remember I was in a all black, black middle school, and it was like a mixture of Black and Hispanic. And like a lot of people would make fun of the black dudes because I used to hang with a bunch of these dudes and we would talk about like Naruto video games or some other nerdy stuff and they would make fun of them. I said to the guys, don't worry about that because sooner or later them girls will come back try to ask you out and try to get your number and everything.
Well, you know, Joseph C. Phillips wrote a whole book called "He Talks Like a White Boy." He talks about that in the first 2 or 3 chapters. So it's not like people are just making this stuff up that people are exaggerating it. No, this is stuff that really happens in real life. Dr. Skip Gates did a whole documentary called "The Two Black Americas," where he talks about this very same issue.
Well, sure, I definitely believe that. Yeah, I definitely believe that there's a divide, but debates or really sitting down and facing the individuals who are adversaries to what their goals and purposes are. I mean, even in my own life, like dudes say all types of stuff. Like there's a circle of very successful black men that I'm associated with, and we don't even talk to anybody who. I mean, yeah, there's conflict at times, but what?
Well, there you go, Gabe.
Opinion have any bearing on the way that I move forward in life?
Gabe, you just answered your own question. You just answered your own question, Gabe, because when the men that you just spoke of, the men that are highly successful, that's your community. Not these other clowns that's out here that are just trying to take from the pot without contributing to it. See, we have to get out of this mindset where we just consider an all-encompassing community. Not everybody is part of our community. Like okay, for instance, when I'm here in Seattle, right? Not a lot of black people out here, but there is some African descent people. But then you look at them, you have people who are what you would consider ADOS. You have people who are maybe perhaps from East Africa. You got some people from West Africa. But then you look at these people, right? And I guess maybe from the white perspective, we all appear to be black. But me being ADOS, I can tell the difference. They can tell the difference too. And when they're maneuvering through areas and stuff like that in social settings, they seek out individuals who are of their community, even though we all look alike. They know who's of their community, and individuals that are not of their community, like myself, I'm not part of the East African community. They walk right past me. They walk past me and they'll address somebody else who's of their community. We have to get in the habit of doing that and not even listening to people that are not part of our community. What is our community? People who build.
Yeah, I think that's
people who are not destructive. Yeah. At the very least, this is what I've said before, right. Okay? Not everybody's a builder.
I think we're saying the same thing, honestly, yeah.
But at the very least, don't be part of the problem. If you're not part of the problem, then I can at least have a conversation with you. But you have individuals who consistently cause problems, but still want to be part of the community because at the end of the day, their net benefit is far greater than their expenditure. See, if I'm benefiting a lot from something that I don't put a whole lot into, well, hell yeah, I want to be part of that community. But if I got to actually do the work, and it's more of a charitable thing than anything because I'm putting more out than I'm actually getting from the community. Because what a lot of the builders do is they actually take from other communities because if they're doing their commerce and interchange with other communities outside the black community, and then they bring the rewards that they've reaped from those interactions back in the community. Then what does the quote unquote community do? They take whatever has been brought into the community and they take it right back out. That's the problem. So what you got to do is just compartmentalize and say, you know what? I'm not going to keep giving to people that don't respect what I'm doing. Period.
Hey, about 1985, 1989, I started traveling more often. And one of the places that I started going to DR, Central and South America. I ended up in Rio for a weekend. And after that weekend, I started going back to Rio on a regular basis. And I started meeting a lot of young black men. They were younger than me. And a lot of them were lawyers doctors, people from Wall Street. And the first time I met them, most of them will be married. 3 or 4, 5, 6 months later, I'll meet them in Brazil again, and they were divorced. By 1995, black women in America, along with their white counterparts, went on an offensive against these men because they had started connecting with each other and started spreading the words. Hey, look, we can't take this anymore. We have to change the narrative. We have to change our way. We can't be doing what is expected. We can't be somebody can't be telling us what to do, and then when we do it, then they change the narrative and want us to do something else. All these guys had the same thing in mind. They all came from different parts of the country, and they all come from different walks of life, as we put it. But they came together in Rio, sat down and talked, and started planning things. I see guys went down there, and the money that they used to spend on women in America, they went down there and they bought apartments and rented them. And the Gong can verify this if you guys doubt me. They started buying stuff all over Brazil. And I know a few who invited me even to Nicaragua. Say, hey, I got an apartment there. I'm going to buy it. So I'm going to rent it out. These guys invested their money instead of spending it on cars and women in America. And the women went on the offensive. Today, you're seeing what people are saying, the women are coming back. But these guys are not coming back. So I understand what you're saying, Gabe, but it's not that the conversation wasn't had before. It has been had before. It still continues to some point now, but the people who are having it now are the people who are just growing up and realizing what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just haven't seen any of the conversations. I mean, publicly by those black men who are very successful, or even, from my own personal experience. So I don't know. The place that I hear it is on YouTube.
You mean social media?
Primarily YouTube, really. Not all social media.
Well, I mean, these discussions were happening on Facebook before there was a YouTube. So
yeah, that's why I said the places I hear it are on YouTube. I'm just talking about me.
They're still going on Facebook as well.
Yeah, that stuff was going on long before Facebook was even something. I think it was
Twitter.
Even happening on Black Planet. So
Twitter. Oh yeah, they're still going on Black. Believe it or not, Black Planet is still active.
Only you would know that, right?
Yeah. I periodically check and see what conversations are going on over there, and the conversations mirror what's going on over here. And on Instagram, you take a combination of Instagram. It's almost okay. It's almost like this. Like, say for instance, if you go to a club, right? You go to a nightclub. Mm-hmm. You go to a nightclub downtown. Go to a nightclub midtown. Go to a nightclub uptown. Go to a nightclub in the suburbs. The same exact thing is going on in all the nightclubs. They're all different locations, but it's still a venue where you expect to see certain behaviors. So social media platforms across the board, a lot of the conversations are had, by the same demographics. So.
Yep. I remember seeing this stuff on AOL Black Voices in 1999. So this has been an ongoing problem for a minute. We just don't know how to actually correctly address it, because the narrative always seems to be in the hands of the opposition rather than those who are being opposed against. And that, for me, that part of the conversation needs to be picked up from there. I think Sergeant Willie Pete, shout out to SWP, man. He really took the mantle with that on YouTube, because he really came in and just laid it all out. That these conversations are BS, and that the right people are not at the table having this conversation at all. And he really took it to the next level for himself back in like 08, 07, 08. He really just came out and just laid it all out, and that this is BS. That these people are pushing this pushing this agenda, and no one's really opposing it. It's crazy. Because even Hill Harper and a couple of other guys had spoke about this at length on panel discussions, that this is an actual problem. How we perceive highly upwardly mobile black males versus how we see other groups of people, other groups of males, is a problem.
See, one of the things that I see, that a lot of black women get educated, and there's a decreasing number of black men who when they say educated, go to college. But those who do are more focused on their future than the women are on their future. The women, each new generation of the older women tend to draw the younger women to the side and say, look, we got to maintain this thing. While the younger men with each generation, they are breaking away from the tradition. The ones that are going to college, the one that's staying in the neighborhood, what we call Pookie and Ray Ray, they're going along with the women. The ones that are going to college are breaking free from that control of the women. And that's what's happening now. Each new generation, you see, having a conversation that that my generation had, then my kids have, and now you have another generation that's coming up that they are having it, and the generation after them are starting to have the same conversation.
Yeah.
So it's continuing, only it's not as in the same vein as the older generation had. The older generation, we had to fight both sides, But now the younger generation, they're seeing it, and they're focusing in the direction that we want to go. This guy said, "Look, I can't get married at 20 and let this woman run my life. I have to put some money in the bank. I have to do some travel. I have to find my way in life before I can do all that." Whereas my generation was told, you know what, you grow up, you go to school, get a good job, you get married, and you live happily ever after. But they didn't tell you that you couldn't live happily ever after. That was a farce. Whereas today's generation are already seeing it, because they're on YouTube and they're seeing it. They're on Facebook and they're seeing it. They see it with their parents. Grandma, and all the aunties don't get married. They sit around the house talking trash. So they're seeing it.
All right, we're gonna close it out right there. Thank you all for joining us. If you have not hit the like button, please do so now. Share the video if possible, and hit that notification bell so you get all the updates from the Black Brain Trust, including those posted on the community tab. And make sure you all follow Super Triz on YouTube as well, youtube.com/Super Triz. And also one more update. Help us get to 2,000 subscribers. We're at 1.93 now. We are hoping to get to 2,000 by the end of the year with our current trajectory. So help us out in that regard. And with that being said, we are out. Shalom to everyone.